KCRW sponsors include A24, presenting Moonlight, a film chronicling 3 chapters in the life of a young black man discovering his identity and experiencing first love as he moves from childhood into manhood. In theaters now.
Hey, I'm Josh Barrow, your new host of Left, Right, and Center. Every week, join Rich Lowry, Bob Scheer, and me for a contentious yet civilized debate of the week's big political stories, from ISIS to the U.S. economy to this 47-candidate presidential election we're having. You can find Left, Right, and Center on KCRW's iTunes page.
From KCRW Santa Monica and KCRW.com, it's The Treatment. Welcome to The Treatment. I'm Elvis Mitchell. My guest, director Baltasar Kormákur, likes to put his actors through extreme situations, but he still loves them anyway. My admiration for his film goes back to his first film, 101 Reykjavik, but he's also done Contraband, Jar City, Two Guns, and his new film is Everest. First of all, Baltasar, thanks so much for coming here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Elvis.
And you do like to put actors through extremes, don't you?
Well, it's a kind of a thing that I'm interested in as well, to draw performances from nature, not only from paper, and by putting people through elements actually brings out certain kind of rawness in the performer, and I'm more interested in accessing the personality than actually dressing them in a character, like getting into people and by defining the character, what you allow me to see inside of you, instead of building something outside and creating a character in that sense.
I almost feel like for you, this comes from your background as an actor. Where and it feels like a lot of things you do, and I'm even going back to 101 Reykjavik for this, or certainly The Deep, is for you, character is action, isn't it? I mean, the way people respond to stuff physically is character for you in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think in some ways, I've tried to, explain this, is like our character is defined by how he reacts, to things, right? And I like to define the character through the work and through how he reacts to things, instead of deciding, it's like putting a glasses on or a wig or whatever it is. It's actually, I can say I have a bad side inside of me, a nasty side. I have a very good big heart side, and all kinds of things. And when I let someone in there, I can let him into the nasty side of me, or I can let him into the nicer side of me, or a blend of that, and it's almost like a balloon that can blow up inside of you. And I experienced this as an actor. I was playing an extremely nasty character, and my mother said to me at some point, asked me not to come to dinner when I was playing that character. So I was warming up the nasty side of me to allow people in there, and that for me is really acting that I'm interested in. Like, it's not all about gimmicks and the same, we are playing in this movie real people. I'm not, like I've said with Krakauer, something, he had more hair than Michael Kelly. I don't care.
You're talking about John Krakauer, who wrote the book.
Yeah. And Michael Kelly, from House of Cards.
Yeah,
he's kind of has a bald head, and like, I could put a wig. It's not a big deal, but I just felt like that's not what I'm after. I'm after an essence, or of a character, and that's more interesting to me. It's not defined by weight or or color even.
Well, tell the audience a little bit tell them what Everest is about. It's, as you say, it's a real life story based on the disastrous blizzard that befalls the climbers on Mount Everest in the mid-90s.
Yeah, and it's about the beginning of commercialization of Everest. And in '96, they are the pioneers of taking people who some say shouldn't be on the mountain at all, up mountain for money. And it's a very interesting time. And I've said it's about everything, it's not only about the blizzard, because that's one thing. The blizzard only kills people because a lot of things have happened before the blizzard comes in. And that's what drew me to the story. There's about hubris, there's about mistakes, there's about all kinds of elements that end in a catastrophic situation. So it's not your typical disaster movie, I live in Iceland, a country that, people now are flying up in helicopters to volcanoes, erupting volcanoes, to take selfies, Someone's going to get hurt. Nature's not a theme park. It's an extremely, powerful force that you are humbled by, and you realize your limitations.
It's interesting too, because one thing that happens so often in your movies is that people become different people once the sun goes down. There's a big nighttime aspect to your movies, and I will almost wonder, part of the interest for you to Everest is that it becomes a truly scary place once the sun goes down.
Yeah. Well, in my country, there is.
I've been to your country.
Yeah,
there's sometimes where there is no sunlight.
There is no sunlight, or there is no darkness sometimes.
Sure.
So I experienced there's a huge difference of people in Iceland in the summer as is in the winter. It's a very different characters people show. I think, it's a really interesting observation. I've never thought about this, but this probably comes from intuition. From my, it's not necessarily as conscious. But I love, like also when it's dark and people are just sitting in the base camp talking, kind of calm down. There's different conversations that happen then, like those kind of things. I drove that also from my own travels. I traveled on horses across the highlands for weeks on, with only food on horses and 50 horses and a couple of friends, and we ride for 14, 15, 16 hours a day,
So that kind of physical testing is something you're used to.
It is, and it's a part of that is kind of how you get to the core of who you are, through dealing with nature, and you really see it also in your fellows, who are traveling with you. How somebody who's really strong and can do everything, and then like cut week later, extreme difficulties, fog and cold, and he's just falling apart. Somebody wasn't showing off in the beginning, really, maybe humble, and then suddenly that person becomes extremely strong when danger, arrives. And I think this is, I've tried to understand why people climb up mountains, and most mountaineers don't really explain that very much. They try, but it's all about numbers and stuff like that. But I think some kind of accessing yourself through that is a big part of the need to be faced with this kind of adventure. That's my what I take from it.
Because so much of that kind of exposure to something, to almost a kind of danger that doesn't quite make sense in some ways, is kind of a way that you like to define characters. Again, we go to Jar City or Contraband or The Deep, which is another real story, and where somebody is defined by his reaction to an extreme experience. That idea of just becoming who you are in those situations, is that one of the things that appeals to you?
Very much so. Because there's certain rawness to it. I don't know if you know the film, a Russian film, Come and See. Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite films.
Yeah, why is that?
I saw it, I think, in a film festival in Iceland when I was around 20, and I hadn't even thought about becoming a filmmaker at the time. I was studying to act, and there was existentialism that it hits on a core inside of you that it doesn't happen in your brain. It happens somewhere in your body, that you're watching a movie and it's so visceral, it's so real. And people, it's beyond, explanation, the torture that this man is taking through. And it's just so raw and real that at a certain point you think, we are animals, that part of you, which I call existentialistic, might be, I don't know if I'm using the word right, but for me, that is existentialism, Well,
the idea, though, being reduced to your primal self.
Yes, yeah.
Being taken away from everything that sort of... And at some point this happens, even in that little house in 101 Reykjavik, you basically sort of taken away from everything, and you have to be defined by what you are as kind of an animal, is this thing you're talking about, isn't it?
Because we are, and we are a lot of other things too. And I think when people are going on, that's what they need to access in themselves, the rawest version, the animal in themselves, in many ways,
It's the treatment. We're talking about extremes with my guest, director Baltasar Kormákur, whose new film as director is Everest. And one of the things that's so fascinating about this movie, especially for me, and we've talked about some of these things before, is the way it relates to the way you work, is, again, that idea of thinking you know something. And in every one of these films, it's been about somebody who thought he knew something and had the rug pulled out from under him. And that kind of being humbled by these situations, because they're all kind of... The characters almost always come out of these things humbled by them. Yeah. And I wonder where that comes from for you.
Well, it's probably who I am myself in so many ways. I put myself forward. I have a lot of courage as a character, I would say, and I have a lot of ego to deal with, and you go and you put yourself in a situation where you become the strongest and things become the most interesting when everything turns out different than you expected. And you actually have to kind of react on your feet. And you're humbled by it, you thought things were going to go different. And I've had this both in relationships and with people. And then you figure out, the rug is totally pulled from under me. And if you can get yourself out of that situation, that is it's just and I could tell you about stories or specific stories, but it's almost like when you're swimming up against a stream, it's when you are the strongest, It's not when you're going down the river,
But I wonder, too, part of this is if that's what the filmmaking process is for you, where you go and think it's going to be one thing, and you bring in actors, and you bring in your cinematographer, and you bring in your production designer, and then you lay in the music, and it somehow becomes something else. I mean, because I got to imagine this has happened to you. You thought you were making one movie, and this turned out to be something else.
Yeah, and I think now I go in with knowing that, I don't expect. I create my vision. I have but at the same time, I become more interested in, like I said to the actors on Everest in the first day, like, we're going to work from chaos. And they're going, what is he talking about? No, we're going to work from chaos. How do you work from chaos? Well, I'm trying to find the scene. I'm not trying to, I can tell you where to sit. I can tell you where to stand, when to walk, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in something that surprises me, something that I didn't, think of. And by chaos is that, world is created by chaos, That way I wanted to access the actors without staging them, because I think that what happens, things come stiff, All I do is that I motivate people. I spend a lot of time at the table. I don't ask them to act out the moments. I don't care about that.
Really?
No, I don't do that in rehearsals. I am interested in motivating people, talking about the history behind the character and why is he why would he do this and not that, Don't play it for me. I don't care. I'm interested in finding it in the elements, in the moment, but we just have to be in line motivation-wise, And that becomes interesting, because then, if not, filming becomes an important part of the filmmaking. If it's not a creative, if it's not a creative thing. If you decided everything in beforehand, which some people can, and it can be interesting, they kind of kill the joy of shooting the film,
But I guess for you, especially in the case of this movie, Everest, the physical preparation had to be really key. I mean, you had to find actors who were willing to train climbing mountains, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things. But that is a physical, that's like going to the gym and getting ready for something, like for a boxing movie or something. And I think that's they had to get ready for that, but that's just kind of homework, It's not finding someone on the street and throw them on a mountain and see how he reacts. That's a whole different thing. You actually have to be very professional in that situation to be able to let me in and be able to not act in that circumstance. It might not make total sense, but that's a whole different thing.
What you're saying, though, and I think I get this, is by investing in the physical, they're not acting anymore. They're actually living it, right?
Yeah.
Which is that thing that happens once you rehearse and rehearse, you get past all that stuff. You know it so well that you're not thinking about it anymore. You're just doing it, right?
Yeah. And the thing is also like people say, oh, is that kind of method? No, the method part, when people, are living the character off the set and you have to call them by name, it's just a good excuse for being a dick on set. That's basically what that is. This is method that I am interested in. Like using the elements to create and living it in the moment. Not in your trailer.
And on that note, we'll take a break. My guest is Baltasar Kormákur, whose new film as director, which he really tests his actors again, is Everest. It's the treatment. There's more to come. Stay with us.
Browse the KCRW store and shop for vacations, wine classes, frequent flyer miles, dinners, and merchandise. Shop to support KCRW only at kcrw.com/store.
Welcome back to The Extreme. It's The Treatment. My guest is director Baltasar Kormákur, whose new film is Everest, the adaptation of the story of the 1996 climbing disaster on Mount Everest. And going back to something I was asking you about before the break, because we really see it with Jason Clarke, but also almost every one of the principals, Jake Gyllenhaal, or Josh Brolin, or Michael Kelly. So many of the actors, we get to see what darkness, or even Keira Knightley, who's away on the other side of the planet. In darkness, that idea of somebody becoming, they're almost in some weird way, their truest nature comes out when the sun's not around. That's so interesting, as using that as kind of a way to define character.
Yeah, I think that's, as I said earlier, partly, you come from a place of extremes, I come from a place of extremes. Iceland is either dark or bright or night, and it changes the energy in the country, it changes everything.
But also, if it's like that for hours, you can't pretend to be that anymore. I mean, you can start trying to do one thing, but when there's 14 hours of darkness or 20 hours of darkness, you can't do that anymore.
No, it gets you.
Or if you're completely exhausted on the top of a mountain, and when the sun comes out, there's hope.
Yeah,
we can see that.
Yeah.
Even though that sunlight is really limited because there's clouds passing over Jason's character and everything. But once that darkness comes back again, and again, it comes back for all the characters, basically everything you've ever done at some point, it's pitch black where somebody is in front of the camera.
And it is, it's an interesting, I have to be totally honest, I never really thought about it in that specific, ways. As I said, it's probably intuition and how I read and understand people. But I do think, there's certain foolishness, there's certain, there are all kinds of energy in the sun, you can joking around, but when the dark comes, people usually, even when they're partying, they become more real. There is something, something that is brought out in people, and I felt this in my trips in the Highlands, and stuff like that. When that happens, it's just a whole different energy. I can't explain exactly. I don't have the kind of the mental explanation for that, but it's more like just being sensitive to your surroundings,
But it's also the thing too, so often placing characters in exteriors, which you do a lot too.
Yeah.
They're often outside.
But I that's true, and I do really like. And even in my most indoory film, 101 Reykjavik, it's still he went on a glacier to kill himself, right?
Yes.
So everyone in is defined by nature and weather in my movies, because that is it's just like it's a constant part of you. And I was asked today when I was doing this big junket, so what is the preparation, and each one, everyone is asked about that, they go through it, and I said, and truthfully, going to school every morning. It was my preparation for Everest, because I had to go through a blizzard almost every morning, like walking up that hill, So since I was 6 years old, so it becomes a big part of it. And I do like to use those elements to define people. And I think people are defined by, even in good weather, in the desert. People living in desert are different.
Well, as in Two Guns, which is all these sun-blasted vistas there.
So I'm really, I think we, as much as we think we are not often a part of Mother Nature, we are. Cities have affect people. And they have their own kind of system. That's something I'm interested in filmmaking, and I will keep on doing. And I hopefully learn something more about it.
And sometimes too, people. And this happens a lot in your films, too. We see it in a very violent way here, where the base camp and the storm blows the tents away. But at some point in almost all your films, somebody thinks that he or she is safe indoors. And it turns out that they're not.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah, that's just a fake security that we think, we're going to be secure now. We have earthquakes in my, where I live. And the most dangerous place in an earthquake is inside, So maybe I'm taking the carbon from everything. I was in America and I was listening. For some reason, Fox was on, news, and it said something like, "Wherever you live in America, you're more likely than not to be hit by a terrorist activity." I was like, that is the best. So you are gone, no matter what you try,
It's The Treatment. There's no terrorist activity here, but my guest, who's putting people through lots of extremes, including me, is Baltasar Kormákur. His new film as director is Everest. And I guess I just wondered, because your last film, The Deep, is so much about sort of being tested by the elements. Did you have to think twice about this movie when you took it on?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I was so happy when I was offered this project. There was a lot of work to be done on the script and everywhere,
and there's so many different books. I tried to get through a couple of different versions, and some of these books are from so many perspectives. And one of the great things about the script is we get to see all those perspectives, because if you see the TV movie version of From Into Thin Air, it's all from John Krakauer's perspective, and the idea that at some point you cast everybody's point of view into doubt. Yeah, is that one of the things that you like about the script as well?
Well, one of the things that I did take out of the script in the beginning when there was a scene with everyone at home, and I thought it was an expositional way of explaining the characters. Let's learn them. I don't want to throw them all there, make people confused, and then we're going on that journey, and then you learn about them and you start understanding them, and when you're just about to understand them and connect with them, you're hit with the storm. So that was a very conscious choice. That's the way you learn to recognize people on a journey. It was also a chance for me to do something kind of in line with what I had been doing back home, like the deep on the large scale, which was my reason for this journey in the beginning. To go to Hollywood, have make films on a larger scale. I mean, I come from a nation of 300,000 people. You are limited. Even though I was one of the lucky ones who got my Icelandic movies shown around, it's still a very limited what you can do.
But you also came to that period where Iceland became known for its cinema, but basically around 15 years or so ago, a lot of films started coming to North America from Iceland, and we got to see all these different kinds of perspectives. But there's so much about all these things I'm talking about that you do, but still these are, for the most part, pretty intimate films.
Yeah. And
even a film like Contraband is a pretty intimate film in its way.
Yeah. And I think in this case, you talked also about the characters and the different, perspectives. I really liked to be able to show the different characters, different perspectives, and let the audience do the kind of judging.
Because that's one of the things too. You're talking about throwing people in and making them be confused. There's that aspect to your films too, where there's a lot going on at the beginning. You often bring a lot of people, and you don't even have characters calling each other by name sometimes. Like Jar City, we don't know who's who. Yeah. And then eventually we sort of get to know as the movie goes on. That means that you're putting a lot of confidence in your audience, doesn't it? You're saying that they will sit and wait for this information.
Yeah, I that's what I like to do. Because as I said, like scenes in the beginning would explain its character. Sure. I feel like there's no reason to sit through it. So you told me what he's going to be. So I need, what was my part of it? So I like to kind of rattle people, do all kinds of things, and then slowly you find. Maybe that's, again, working from chaos a little bit, It's like, oh, we're telling that story, Instead of, I just don't like when I go into the cinema and I know from the first scene what this movie is going to tell me, So it's basically, and you see it in a lot of horror movies and thrillers. They just it's so by the numbers, the first scenes, that you know exactly what's going to come back. Oh, the people are moving to a new house. All right, we're not going to know what's going to happen. I think audiences in general can take a little more than that, and it's something about organic way of telling a story. So the story is kind of organic, like you don't exactly know where it's going, and then slowly that's the story, we are telling. And that's just my taste, and therefore I kind of lean into making that kind of films.
I guess I wonder if that comes from your theater background, where you want to give actors a chance to sort of play things out instead of having them tell us who they are, too. I mean, I understand you want to trust the audience, but I also felt like it's this thing, because you come from this acting background, that you want to give actors a chance to sort of show some things instead of, and not give everything away at once.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a Jackal play, for example, that is exactly how they play. There's a lot of people coming.
Oh my God, yeah.
And they all come from, and then
by the end of the first act, you still don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and then it gets more and more exciting, and I like that. I don't know if it's my theater background. It could be, I do like to trust the actor. I don't like him to expositionally or faxing the information to the audience. I mean, it's all a balance act, and that's just, the way I guess I like life, I
have to say too that I really like this score.
Oh,
this
nice!
It's a really great score, and it's a bit more music than you used in the past, because there are often silent stretches in your film, or you use pop in great ways in your movies. But this is a really great, almost old-fashioned. adventure score in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, Dario Marinelli,
Oscar winner.
Yeah, great. And it's great because I was very clear with him. I wanted to come from the left. And what I mean by that, again, I didn't want to get the big score from the beginning, like every you know this from Hollywood movies. If somebody steps on a mountain, you get the horns coming, and or the Scottish pipe, like it's like I got it, we're not in Scotland, we're in Nepal, but it's very common that the Scottish pipe comes every time you see a mountain in a movie. So the movies have kind of cliches of their own, and for a good reason, I'm sure. But so I wanted to get somebody who's and he is kind of he's not a kind of big blasty.
He does really emotional. I mean, that great score he won the Oscar for Atonement.
Yeah.
Really, almost like chamber pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to come from and then pull him a little bit towards the size of the film, and that way come from the left instead of bringing somebody much more commercial, and bringing him from right to the left. That was my approach, and we had a great relationship.
Because at the beginning, it's almost like you're coming out from underwater. I mean, there's kind of all this noise and all these people coming together, and that kind of you use sound almost as a kind of a musical component for the first half hour or so of the film. Yeah,
and it's kind of, I wanted also the I don't know how to say this because excuse my language, is like siren or like
the siren.
Siren, yeah, sure. The siren of the mountain. We talked a lot about that. How the mountain seduces you towards itself. And people can't stand, they can't resist it, but then it smacks you in the face,
Yeah, just basically the sirens calling you to the rocks.
Yeah. That's part of what, we want. There's certain danger, but there's certain, seduction in the score.
But I guess I want to ask you, too, because you've done 2 films in a row based on real-life disasters. And I wonder, what's it like to do that? I mean, obviously, now people sort of think of you in that way, that you can do that kind of film. What is it you think there is about you that makes you suited for doing that kind of movie?
I mean, it's always hard to define yourself, because I'm just living through it. I'm just being myself in the moment and in the opportunities that the life, offers me. But I think in some way, if I were to step outside of myself, and I think there's a certain honesty and rawness to my work, and I think I'm not afraid of even, as I said, I mean, as much as I respect and I want to honor the people, I'm not making an obituary, obituary. Mm-hmm. I'm actually trying to tell a real story. And you have to be able to face yourself, face the people, and be honest about it, And weirdly, people will come with you, they will, join you. Even the people, the relatives of Rob. And I said it pretty early. I'm not going to sanitize Rob.
And Rob is a character played by Jason Clarke.
Yeah. Sorry, the Rob Hall. Obviously he made a mistake on the mountain. And I'm not going to wipe that out. And I think you have to be kind of raw and be able to also be a bit honest with yourself. How would you want to be portrayed yourself?
We're out of time, Baltasar. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
My guest is Baltasar Kormákur, whose new film as director is Everest. Our recording engineer here at NPR West is Leo Delagula. The show is mixed by Kat Yor. It's edited by associate producer Blake Veit. I'm not going to be played by anybody in the biopic. It's The Treatment. To catch up on past episodes of The Treatment, go to KCRW.com or listen on your smartphone with KCRW's mobile apps, or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Treatment is produced and distributed by KCRW Santa Monica.